I've been using Fastgen to augment my no-code, low-code product stack in order to be able to get my projects done faster. And you can too. I'm going to show you a little bit about how I've done that and how you might as well. I'm Ray Deck, and at StateChange, we focus on the hardest 5% of no-code, low-code projects and the tools and approaches that allow us to solve those problems just much, much more easily. So let's get into it. Fastgen is one of the newer no-code, low-code backends out there. It joins Xano, it joins Backendless, it joins BuildShip, and even some other newer ones in the play for giving you a better no-code, low-code experience for solving back-end related problems. Now, what's a back-end related problem? That would include, if I'm sort of going over to the Fastgen app right now, that would include what they think about it is in terms of authentication. That's where you have user management. It includes the ability to host a database, which is sort of the model part of it. It includes the ability to set up APIs, which you can access through a web-based interface, which is the primary thing we'll be talking about today, and also the ability to set up workflows that can be triggered either by those APIs or by scheduled events, where you're saying you want something to run every once in a while. And the core of where Fastgen, I think, is really exceptional is where it opens up your ability to use code and compose code into your environment. Like many of these backend systems, it provides, a little bit of, if you will, table stakes, access to logging, access to a database. You can, add more tables and set up relationships because other covers using a PostgreSQL database. But what you're going to find when you're working with these no-code tools is that there's some that are really, really good at providing you with like a database layer and a model. There's some that are really, really good at providing you with like no-code composition functionality. And there's some that are really good at providing you with connectors to other applications. And there's some that are really, really good at providing you with, access to code that you can just sort of compose in. And it's this last one that they do super well. And one of the big ways you can experience this is through their APIs. So I'll show you an example I already created in just a second. But you can create a new route. You have get, post, patch, and delete available to you as methods for creating APIs. If I just say I want to do a post, just to guarantee I don't have HTTP caching. You can decide where you're going to expose it in terms of what path it has on your Fastgen, domain, which they set up for you, and they also support custom domains, as you might imagine. Whether you want it to be authenticated, and this actually is a really cool piece of what they do, because instead of having it be, you can say you just want it to be public, which makes it very easy for testing, but you can also support either direct integration with their user management, so it's coming in on a per user basis based on who's authed, or you can make use of their API tokens. And you can set up API tokens through settings that then you can give to other machines that you want to go talk to your Fastgen backend. This last one I find to be really, really useful about Fastgen because it allows me to more easily compose it into the rest of my no-code, low-code stack. And I'll talk in a second about how I do that with Zapier. And then you can do some other steps in here that has more features, obviously. But the big thing that they provide is they provide a bit of flow validation of sort of flow control sitting in their system, right? So you could say, hey, if a certain condition is true. Come on, there we go. And then you can determine what that condition is, and you can set up variables, which you're going to test things about the environment. You can get information from the database. You can be making third-party API calls. There are a bunch of things you can do in terms of control flow inside, which is about 80% complete, I'd say. And they keep on adding new stuff every day, so it's pretty impressive the way it keeps on growing. And hopefully that invalidates some of the concerns I've had so far in relatively short order. And then the thing that really makes them shine is the ability to introduce this custom code block. Because in this custom code block, you can bring, either JavaScript or Python, into your into your low code stack, and you can do it very easily and very quickly. So if you were to select Python, you can just sort of start coding, and then they take a very standard serverless functionality approach to it, where you can say, here is your Fastgen. If you click away, you will lose it. You can, by the way, this button that expands is super helpful. You can just define a function, and whatever function is that's called Fastgen inside this code file is the one they run. And you can define other functions. And then the most important thing you can do with this that actually is kind of unusual for the no-code platforms that introduce low-code is you can very easily load in dependencies and packages that you want to use. So, for example, if you are working in, say, Python, it often stands to reason that what you really want to do is use, let's see here, let's move this up. Just what I have is real to read. Yeah, there we go. Where you can add what they call pip packages, right? And I can just say I want to add NumPy, right? And you want to be doing some basic numeric things with it. It will install that package and make it part of what you're going to use in your in your code going forward, and it will remember that package installation, which then you can just sort of do exactly what you expect to do in Python, which is you can just say import NumPy. And you can also import things like LangChain. You can import TensorFlow. You can import whatever it is that you need, as long as it can, largely, if it can run in an AWS Lambda, it can probably run inside here. This is super convenient because now, instead of me having to set up all of the infrastructure around building a serverless component, I can just dump the code into here and have it run. It is convenient in the same way that using like a hosted Python notebook would be if I were doing more data science work. But what's really great about it is that I can do just about anything that comes with code, and then I can write just enough code and then just compose that in by composing it through ifs and fors and loops and whatever else, and the few sort of Lego-ish type integrations they also have support for. And it will work very, very quickly. Let me give you an example of how I'm doing that. I've got this other workflow over here, and I'll explain the difference between workflows and APIs in just a second. I've got a workflow over here where I'm updating the information about members in my my state change group. Right, state change is the resource where people come together and work on the hardest 5% of their no code, low code projects. And and one of the things I want to do is sort of get better integration of that between this and the database I want to be using. In my case, the database I'm using is largely over in Xano. And you can do that pretty easily in Fastgen. Now, what I did was I doodled around with code for actually doing my integration with Circle, because I want to be making use of APIs that are available to me, and some more complicated ideas about like looping through large sets of people, and I want to do it relatively rapidly. So I did this over in Visual Studio Code. Right? So I created a bit of code and I was doodling with that, and I would just sort of, run it locally, and I could get a quick script running that I could use pretty easily, very fast. But then the question was, well, I don't want to run it from my computer all the time. And I didn't really want to go through a lot of, effort to mount it up on the web to be, associated with like an, AWS, CloudWatch, cron script or what have you. What's sort of an easy way to do that, using some of these no-code tools. And this is where my friends at Fastgen really came through for me, because I was able to set up a workflow. And I'll describe why it's workflow in just a second. But just by taking the code that I wrote in originally in TypeScript in my in Visual Studio Code, and bring it right over to here. And the key things I needed to do was I need to port it from TypeScript over to JavaScript, because they don't use TypeScript, they only use JavaScript. I had to put it into a function called Fastgen, where previously I was just using an anonymous iffy, and then I just pasted in the code, and it just works. It works with common JS by using require statements. It comes preloaded with fetch, by the way, which makes it very easy to work with. It comes with support for using import statements as well. And all of this I can just sort of cycle through, and my code will fly. It has support for things like using environment variables. So, of course, I don't use process.env the way I might in an ordinary, a node package, but I can access it through what's called a context variable here, which delivers everything associated with the workflow or the API or whatever, as well as a link over to the environment variables that I've set up over in Fastgen. And that makes it super easy to access the stuff. And then I can define functions, of course, inside my function, and just run them all, and I can, and of course, because I was doing a little bit of migration, I had to do a little bit of testing to make sure it would work properly. And they make that super easy too, because I can, always click test code down here, and I can, find out what the logs are that come out of it. So if I were to run, test code here, it will give me information about how this thing has run once it's completed. And just like in Python, I can bring in node packages. I can see I just brought in node fetch as well. And it was loaded anonymously. And I can load in other things. I can load in LangChain if I want to. And it would, and it will bring that into the party. And where this, I think, really gets cool is going to be making use of SDKs and APIs. So there are things like, interacting with AWS or Google, just using bare bones HTTP requests can be quite complicated. And working with, because you're working with API keys, you're working with the way they do signatures, and like there are three or four levels of doing like an AWS version 4 signature, and but they get wrapped up pretty nicely in like the SDKs they make available through npm, right? You can go get the AWS or get Boto if you're going to do this in Python, and it will just take care of a lot of those concerns for you. Puts you in a position where you only have to write a few lines of code. I've got this other project over here where I'm doing this with OpenAI. And if I were to go open this, and I can, add messages to my threads in OpenAI Assistant, and I'm just doing this, of course, in Python. And it's just using the OpenAI library, which allows me to do the whole thing in just a few lines of code, right? So I only have to bring just enough code in order for that to work. Bring this back over to the state change thing. The reason I'm creating this workflow here is to synchronize between what I've got in the Circle community and what I might want to have over in my Xano database. And that makes it really easy for me to do that, because I can push data across. I can manage my keys very easily. And I can test it to make sure it works properly. Now, there's another thing it does that's actually really, really important, which is it allows you to be slow. You see, most of these folks, when they're doing it, just creating code that runs just directly in an API, you're limited to maybe, 3 or 5 seconds or whatever in order for your a process to run. And there are limits also for how long a single code block can run. But the really neat thing is by making it into a workflow, it will run asynchronously. It will kick it. Now, that means that workflows aren't like functions, right? You can't run it and then use the return value. That's not the way their encapsulation works, because they're completely asynchronous. That you fire it off and you don't get to find out about the value until very, very later. But because I know that update from Circle is something that's going to go update the however many hundreds of people are involved in the community, either in an active or inactive state, I know it's not super fast, and so I don't want it to be holding on my API, which is totally fine, because I can have an API, my API, which is update Circle, and it triggers this by just triggering an event called update Circle. And then because my workflow over here is listening for an event called update Circle, it just fires. It just runs. And I can compose that so that, it's going to also run the code here, and I sort of bury the lead. Then I can get my little notification. So like every time this fires off, I get a little text, and it will. So every time this fires off, I get a little text. I'm not showing it because I don't want to show my phone number right now, and it will just send that over. So this is all really slick, and this is all a super, super simple way of integrating Fastgen to get like high value from Fastgen in the context of environment where you might be using some other tools. So let's talk about how we compose those together. So I was using So I was using, Xano here, right? And I'm using Xano to store certain code and data that goes with, parts of the state change stack, and the services and the, the tools we provide, like the the script tag, for example, or just being able to authenticate people and log them in. And I had built some of this, and this was all relatively easy to use. But of course, Xano is not as strong on the code front, and also not very strong on the SDK front, right? In terms of being able to make it easy to go talk to these third-party services. So what I'm doing is I'm composing that in with Fastgen to have Fastgen, go do some of the work, make it these communications, put together the information, and then have Xano in a position to be able to do what it does well, which is go store it in its database and make it accessible to these other APIs that might already exist. Take another example. I'm also a big fan of using Zapier as a no-code system, and Zapier. This for example is a flow that runs every time somebody joins a state change. So if somebody comes in, there are a few things that happens. I get a little notification, they get a little direct message, whatever. But it also wants to go synchronize the data that I've got over in, say, the Xano database. And so I'm using Zapier to go run the custom code that's sitting over in Fastgen because does it so well in Fastgen. Now, Zapier really doesn't want this show to slow down. So the fact that I can in Fastgen have this all run and actually have my API call run super fast because it just sort of kicks it off asynchronously means that from Zapier's point of view, this thing took a matter of milliseconds to run and come back. And then, however long it takes to go upload the data into Xano is happening over the course of the next several seconds, and then that's showing up over in my Xano. So this allows us to compose more of these systems together. So instead of saying, well, which do I use? Do I do things like all through workflows through, say, Zapier? Do I use something like Xano? Do I use something like Fastgen? My answer often is use them all for what they're good for. The truth is most of these things are really inexpensive. Fastgen, particularly their base plan, is relatively cheap. And until you start hitting a whole lot of workflows, you're not really driving the bus from a cost point of view. By bringing that in, you get to cut a whole lot of time out of your process, particularly if you're moderately skilled with code or if you bring ChatGPT to the party, because ChatGPT often knows how to solve problems using code and doesn't know how to do it using the no-code system. So being able to drop a solution directly into one of these code steps is super helpful. And then you can compose multiple code steps together to all run. And a neat thing about Fastgen, and I've been testing this, is there does not appear to be a meaningful top level ceiling on how long a flow is allowed to be. Now, because those flows can be relatively long, that means you're not limited by, say, how long an API call is going to take. You can have something that runs for hours. Near as I can tell, you can have something that runs for days. And you can compose multiple code steps and just loop and loop and loop and loop, and it will also continue to run. That allows me to open up what I can do with Fastgen from an operational point of view that Zapier won't let me do, that Xano doesn't really want to let me do very easily. So that combination of code and being able to use it for the workflows that can run longer and be heavier is where I have found lots of differential advantage. Now, Don't get me wrong, there are lots of additional features sitting inside Fastgen, and I encourage you to check it out. They have a reasonable free tier that's good for experimentation. And I'd say that if you have some code background, or you have enough comfort to even just be able to consume things that are coming from ChatGPT, that you should give it a check it out. I found it to be super useful and accelerating as part of composing into a no-code stack that takes something that previously was in my hardest 5% and now makes it easy. And that is really the purpose of low-code.